Hi, this is PV Online, Unit 3, Earth's Atmosphere. This chapter, we're going to be talking a little bit about things that affect the weather. So meteorology, is the study of the atmosphere. Weather deals with basically what's going on right now. Clouds, lightning, wind, is it raining, etc. Climate, on the other hand, is long-term patterns. So if you're talking about what's in the sky today, it's the weather. If you're talking about the climate the pattern of moisture for Phoenix, Arizona, it's a dry or desert climate. So weather and climate are different definitions. So how thick is our atmosphere? Well, 80% of it is very close to the ground, about 20 kilometers above the Earth. Since the radius of Earth is 6,000 kilometers, you see that that's a very, very thin shell covering the Earth. But what is the atmosphere? It's comprised of a mixture of gases. Some are permanent, some vary over time. The permanent gases are the ones that we have a constant proportion of all the time. The variable gases, which we'll talk about, such as water vapor, vary depending on where you are. And then there's these little things called aerosols. They're the little suspended particles and droplets that are in the atmosphere. The permanent gases, there's three, but basically we have what you call a nitrogen atmosphere because 78% of it is nitrogen, N2. 21% is oxygen, and that is in the O2, two atoms of oxygen bonded together. That's the form of oxygen that we breathe, that we need to live. And then a little tiny bit of the atmosphere is argon. Those percentages stay the same, and that all the way up, if you were measuring it and left the ground and went 60 miles up, that would be the percentages of each gas that far up. Then there are the gases that change over time. Variable, that just means they change. So there's water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, and ozone. Notice ozone. That's an interesting gas. It's an oxygen, but it's not the one you can breathe. It's three atoms of oxygen bonded together. It makes it a completely different substance. We'll talk more about that later. Water vapor, you can see, look at the percentage, is 0 to 4% of the total gas in the atmosphere. So that makes it the third most common molecule in our air. We've got nitrogen, then oxygen, then water vapor. Water vapor is invisible. Don't confuse it with cloud droplets because cloud droplets are liquid. We'll learn about that next chapter. Less than a fourth of 1% of the air is water vapor. And depending on where you are on the surface of Earth, there can be less than 1% in the deserts where we are, or if you're in the tropics, it could be 4% of the total when it's very, very wet and humid. Typically in the mid-latitude, which is most of our country, is 1 to 2% of the total. You could notice that when you look at pictures of the Earth from satellites, there's always clouds. Those are water droplets. But some satellite images can capture water vapor, which is invisible. Carbon dioxide. This is a gas that's been increasing steadily pretty much since we discovered petroleum. You can see that it's up to 380 parts per million, and we'll talk more about that gas later as it affects our climate. Then there's ozone. Ozone's an interesting gas because near the surface you can see it's a very small fraction of what's in the atmosphere. But when you get up into the stratosphere, the layer above the one that we're breathing in right now, it can reach as high as 15 parts per million, and it's really important for us. It blocks harmful radiation, ultraviolet rays that cause sunburns and skin cancer. If ozone is near the surface, then breathing it is not good for you. So you may notice on pollution reports on the weather that sometimes they mention ozone. It's a pollutant down at the level that we're breathing, but up in the upper atmosphere, we really need it there. There's a substance called CFCs that you'll read more about, and the chlorofluorocarbon group of compounds we've discovered drift up into the stratosphere and combine with the ozone and literally break it apart. And that is not a good thing. Another variable gas is methane. It's a greenhouse gas also. Greenhouse gases are those gases that trap heat in the earth. It's varied a lot, typically on a 23,000 year cycle. But again, this is another gas that has been changing over time. You can see in the past 5,000 years it's increased unexpectedly, probably due to agriculture, biomass burning, fossil fuels, and of course there's your cow and sheep burps. Then the aerosols, which are just particulates, are the little solids or liquid drops that are floating around in the atmosphere. They can be man-made, they can be naturally occurring. They don't necessarily mean that there's pollution involved. As a matter of fact, some aerosols are beneficial. If we want precipitation to occur, there has to be a little particle up there in the sky for the water vapor to condense on to make a cloud drop. So what determines atmospheric composition? Well, it's largely due to escape velocity on your planet. Our planet, fortunately, has enough gravitational pull that as gases were developing on the planet, they didn't all fly off into outer space.